Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our Workforce Demographics Study kickoff event. My name is Katie Ingersoll. I'm the Director of Communications, Engagement, and Strategy at SMU Data Arts. I'm a white woman in my late 30s with brown hair, gray glasses, and a maroon sweater. I'm joined by my colleagues, Allison Heishman, who will be presenting with me today, and she'll give her introduction in a moment, and Eamon Dougherty, who is going to be focusing on our chat, and he'll be able to answer questions you have throughout, or if you have any technical issues, feel free to reach out to Eamon via the chat. Before we start our program today, I want to first take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. We're coming together on a virtual platform, but I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands to which we each call home. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people. We honor the Apache, the Caddo, the Comanche, the Coushatta, the Tonkawa, the Wichita, and the affiliated Kichu, Waco, Tawakoni, and Lenni Lenape peoples, upon whose traditional territories SMU Data Arts now exists. If you would like to share a local land acknowledgement in the chat, we invite you to do so at this time. Speaking of the chat, take a moment to find the chat feature in Zoom, where you're welcome to share comments, responses, and questions throughout the presentation. We're going to have a little bit of an interactive format today. We'll be presenting you with a lot of information about the study, and then we'll also be checking in with each other about how we're going to make our study a success. So the chat is an option for you. We'll also have opportunities if you prefer to come off mute and speak out loud. You can choose whatever method of communication works best for you. And like I said, Eamon will be keeping an eye on the chat as well throughout our presentation. So if you have questions, feel free to put those in, and he'll keep an eye on that channel. We have activated the closed captioning, and you can view captions using the CC icon located at the menu on the bottom of your screen. So that's available to you as well. And I am recording today's session. What we're going to do is we'll record the presentation portions, but I'll be pausing the recording during our discussion so that you can share freely. And then we'll make the recording with just the kind of informational portions available to everyone after the session. I think that's all of our housekeeping. So we're going to get started with introductions. I'm going to start with my colleague, Allison. Allison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, as long as I can figure out how to come off mute again. How long have we been doing Zoom? Thanks, Katie. I'm Allison Heishman. I am the Partner Solutions Associate here at Data Arts. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a white woman in her 40s with blonde shoulder-length hair and blue eyes. I'm wearing a brown sweater today, and my background is utilizing the blur feature on Zoom. It's great to see so many folks logged in today and joining us, and I can't wait to work with you all to ensure success on your study throughout this process.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. Okay, so we'd love to start just by hearing from everybody on the call. Like I said, if you want to come off mute and introduce yourself, please feel free. If you prefer the chat, that's also a perfectly great way to communicate with us, but we want to hear from everybody on the call. Just what organization are you with, and why is your organization participating in this study? I'm going to begin recording again, and I'm going to go ahead and invite Allison to start with just a walkthrough of the platform itself and some information about how this will work, how you'll administer the survey to your workforce.
Thanks, Katie. Our agenda is up on the screen, and I am just going to share that I'm going to go off video for the duration of the demo. We will have a moment for questions at the end, but if questions do occur to you, feel free to put those into the chat, and then we can share out and answer as many of those as we are able to when we get to our question portion of this. Thank you so much. So our agenda is up on the screen. I'm going to begin by sharing a bit about SMU Data Arts and our Workforce Demographics Study overview. Together, we'll walk through the Workforce Demographics Study itself, and then I will set you up with some tips for success as you administer the study to your unique workforce. For those of you who aren't familiar, I wanted to take a moment to let you know a little bit about us. To touch very briefly on what we do, our mission is to provide and engage organizations and individuals with the evidence-based insights needed to collectively build strong, vibrant, and equitable arts communities. We employ cutting-edge research techniques and high-powered computing to test hypotheses, build theory, and increase understanding of the arts and cultural sector. Now that you know a little bit about data arts, let's talk about the workforce demographics study. Participating in this study can help your organization better understand the diverse makeup of your staff, board, and independent contractors to remain relevant and representative of our changing society. This data can illuminate strengths, challenges, and opportunities for the organization as you embrace change and meet the needs of an evolving population with unique identities. If your organization has 10 or more people in your total workforce, which includes all staff members, board members, trustees, and independent contractors, you may be eligible to receive a demographic report on your organization once the study is complete if you have a high enough participation rate. Many of the organizations who receive these reports use them to inform their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. Shortly after the study closes, you'll be notified by SMU Data Arts when you can log into the platform and download your unique report. Let's take a look at the survey itself. Here is a list of the types of questions that will be asked in the survey. We'll take a look at those questions in just a moment. Later in the presentation, you'll see behind the scenes of how you will administer the survey and track your organization's progress. The survey itself is a link you'll send to your workforce for them to self-report their anonymous answers. If anyone at your organization has any questions.
Good, how are you? Awesome.
Oh, sorry, let's just make sure everyone is on mute for the presentation today. If anyone at your organization has any concerns about the security of these questions, please reassure them that we take our confidentiality very seriously. This is the landing page where you will go to take the survey. On this page, folks can scroll down to see more information about the survey, a link to frequently asked questions, and SMU Data Arts' commitment to confidentiality. This is also where your participants will have the option to view the landing page, FAQs, and survey in Spanish, which they can access from a drop-down menu in the top right corner. There's an email link to the SMU Data Arts Support Center at the bottom of the page, which provides direct access if you or any of your workforce have any questions. The email you will send with our suggested language will link directly to this page and automatically affiliate with your organization. Here you will find the details on our commitment to confidentiality. We are committed to ensuring that no individual responses will be identifiable in the reports. Data Arts does not collect email addresses for this survey, and participating organizations will only have access to data in the aggregate. And a quick reminder that the landing page and the entire survey is available in Spanish. This translation can be accessed using the drop-down menu in the upper right-hand corner of the site. As we begin our survey, you can see our example study pre-populated with an organization's name right on the page. In this case, it's Example Art Museum. If someone from your organization ends up on the landing page without a link that pre-populates, they can still find your organization from a drop-down menu. Whether or not the organization is pre-populated or selected from the list, users can affiliate with more than one organization if they need to. They do not have to take the survey more than once. If you're curious about what other organizations are participating in this study, you can download a list of those organizations here as well. As you can see from this drop-down menu, we have a preloaded list of all the organizations invited to participate in this study. Your colleagues can affiliate with up to 3 organizations that are participating in the study at one time on the survey. For example, they may be a trustee or board member at your organization and a staff member at another participating organization. Instead of having to take the survey for each organization, they would only have to take it once. If you do not find your organization's name on this list, you can contact our support center. And after they affiliate with our organization, they select Continue to Survey. The only required question in the survey is to select your primary role at each of the organizations you affiliate with. While you may be thinking these roles are broad, remember, we don't want anyone's role to be easily identifiable during the reporting phase. You should send this survey to all staff, board, and independent contractors affiliated with your organization. I want to take a brief moment to point out one of the accessibility modes in our survey. Clicking on low vision mode in the upper right-hand corner of the survey adjusts the survey visibility format in order to allow for greater readability on both desktop and mobile platforms. This mode increases contrast ratios, font sizes, and font weights for the survey taker. If you select the staff role, you will receive this next question. Next, we ask if you identify as an artist. We ask this question to determine how artists are present throughout organizations, from administrative to programming, even if the artist isn't functioning as an artist in the workplace. Next, through a dropdown, you can select the year you were born. When you key in your postal or zip code, please note that we'll accept numbers or letters. This page has questions around gender identity. These questions, along with the questions on sexual orientation, were developed in partnership with the Williams Institute at UCLA Law School. I want to reiterate that you have the option to select I decline to state for any question besides your role at the organization. This page allows you to identify your sexual orientation. There is an option to write in an identifier that is not listed here, as well as an I decline to state option. We want to provide organizations with the ability to compare their workforces to those of their local community. We ask race and ethnicity related questions that go beyond traditional census categories so that we can gain a deeper understanding of the sector. These deeper dives around country of origin seek to be more inclusive and demonstrate a more vibrant picture of the arts and culture workforce that may be neglected when solely comparing to census categories. The next slide shows additional information that automatically populates the survey based on your answers to the questions above. Some additional identifying questions, such as the example shown here, may appear based on how each participant answers the questions of dissent. Like the previous slide, you're invited to self-identify in this next section as well. By selecting My Disability is Not Listed Here, you have the option to write in your answer. This is available for each identity section in the survey, along with the I decline to state option. All information is collected anonymously and aggregated in distribution to ensure the security of all data collected. These workplace perception questions are intended to measure individuals' sense of well-being and psychological safety in the workplace. Data Arts has added these questions to our survey to improve our ability to research how different forms of diversity in arts and culture workplaces affect employee and organizational success. Responses to these perception questions will be shared in the aggregate to inform your organization's demographic report if you reach a high enough participation threshold. And that's it. Once you submit your responses, you are taken to a page with a list of links to provide additional resources and support. And from user research we've done, the survey takes most people about 5 to 7 minutes to finish. Now that you've seen what our survey looks like, I'm going to show you how you will administer the survey to your colleagues. We've built a way for you to send the survey to them and track the number of responses you receive anonymously in real time. Approximately 2 weeks before we launch our study, you will receive 2 emails from SMU Data Arts, which will give you access and more instructions to log into our system. Your first step should be to open the email with the subject "Confirm your email" to activate your account. This email will prompt you to create a password for the account we have created for you in our system. The other email you will receive from Data Arts provides more information on the initial steps you can take once you've logged into your Data Arts account. If you already have an account with Data Arts, you will only receive this second email, and that subject is "You have been added to a study. Log in to Data Arts now." When you first log in, you will be welcomed to the study. After you click on Get Started, you are taken to your dashboard. Here you'll see some high-level information about this study. If your organization already has a Data Arts account that it uses for grant applications, this will be in the same account. You can ensure you're in the correct view to administer the study by making sure the purple palette icon is selected. The blue speech bubble icon will take you back to your admin dashboard where you can enter and edit data for the CDP. Because we're logged in to participate in the study, the first thing we'll want to do is click on the study name. Pictured here is the example workforce demographics study, but when you log in, you'll be able to click on the SMU Data Arts Workforce Demographics Study. And this dashboard is where you will administer the study to your board and workforce. If another staff member at your organization should be the point of contact to administer the study, or if you'd like to add a point of contact to the study, you can use the Manage Contacts feature to add them, which is shown in the red box here. Once you've confirmed you are the right person to administer the study, you'll see we suggest 4 tasks to help you get the most out of our system. First, you have the option to confirm your organization's name. Remember earlier when we were looking at the survey and people were given a drop-down list to select an organization? This is where it pulls your organization name from. For example, if your account uses an organizational legal name, but your organization does business under another name or a more familiar name, this is where you can enter the name that people are most familiar with. You also have the option to upload a logo to help make your organization more recognizable to those taking the survey. Here's what that looks like in the platform. This serves as a nice confirmation to a user that they've selected the right organization, especially if there is another organization with a name similar to yours. If you'd like to be eligible to receive that free report on your organization's demographics, like the one I showed you earlier, you'll need to enter your workforce numbers. If you reach a high enough participation threshold and have more than 10 participants in your organization, you'll be eligible for a free report that gives you an overview of the makeup of the demographics of the staff, board, and contractors at your organization. In order for us to create this, we'll need to know how many people fill these roles at your organization. You'll be able to enter that info here in your second task. We've provided a helpful tooltip for each of the categories to help you enter your workforce numbers next to each role. However, if you do have any questions, you can always reach out to our support center staff through phone or email. I'll share their contact information again at the end of the presentation. Lastly, we recommend sending an introductory email to your workforce, letting them know your organization will be participating in the study. We've provided language in this task here. After you click View Email, you can copy and paste and send to your workforce. Remember to only send the email out to the same amount of people you set as your workforce number. Here is what an email task looks like when you click on View Email. Within your task list, there are several email tasks which contain suggested language to make administering the study to your colleagues easier. I want to point out that these tasks are just a guide to help you successfully administer the study, and you can use your discretion for how many email reminders you would like to send out to your colleagues. This example of an email task is the email we suggest sending to your colleagues on the day of the study launch. Since Data Arts does not collect email addresses, you will be sending email reminders directly to your colleagues through your preferred email client such as Outlook or Gmail. The next step is to copy and paste the subject and body of the email from your task into your email client. Remember the link from earlier? This survey link in the email is a link customized for your organization. Using this link when your colleagues open the survey, your organization's name is automatically selected. The emails in the task will be automatically populated with this link in order to make communication with your workforce as smooth an experience as possible. If you ever want to take a look back at these tasks, they will all be saved in your account. To show you how this process works again, here is a screenshot of these tasks, and they will be listed in your administration page. When you click on a task, it expands so you can see the instructions. For example, the instructions for name your organization are displayed here. If I type in the name and click on save, the task is now complete and will appear under your completed tasks. We have a feature where a link appears for each task in your completed section, and you can mark incomplete. That way, if you or a colleague accidentally mark a task as complete but have not actually completed it, you can undo it. The only task that you are not able to edit after completing is inputting your workforce numbers. Once you enter these numbers, our system calculates the number of responses you will need in order to be eligible for the report on your organization's demographics. You will need to email the support center if you would like those numbers changed. Remember, the total workforce count you enter here should be the same number of people that you send the survey link to and should include your staff, board, and independent contractors. Once you've entered your workforce numbers, a graph will appear on your dashboard so you can track your organization's progress once they begin taking the survey. For this example, we can see that we need 12 responses to be eligible for that free report on your organization. The graph updates in real time, so anytime you log in, you'll have the most up-to-date information. Let's recap. You will receive 2 emails from DataArts. The first email allows you to activate your account and create a password to log into your dashboard. The second email provides information about our recommended next steps for the study. Naming your organization and uploading your logo is optional, but will help your colleagues easily identify your organization. If you'd like to be eligible to receive that free report on your organization's workforce and be able to see your participant tracker graph, you must set your workforce numbers in the dashboard. We have provided language if you'd like to email your workforce ahead of the launch. After the survey launches, you can complete additional tasks. Many of them are emails you will send to your staff and board. You can use your discretion for how often you'd like to send out these reminders. You can also edit and personalize the email reminders before you send those out. If you've reached a high enough response rate to receive a report on your organization's demographics and have a workforce of at least 10 individuals, you will be able to download that from the platform approximately 3 weeks after the study closes. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our support center if you have any questions throughout the run of the study. We have a very friendly team waiting to hear from you and are trained to answer any questions you may have. And speaking of questions, let's pause to answer any questions that may have come up during that demonstration. And I'm going to turn it back over to Katie in a bit to talk about our additional resources.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, so as Allison said, feel free to start sharing your questions in the chat. So I do have a question here from Ruth. They have a few very small part-time staff and consultants. Do we have any guidance as to whether everyone should participate or perhaps everyone who works a minimum number of hours per fiscal year? Allison,
Yeah, I could speak to that a little bit. That's a great question. We do recommend that if you have independent contractors that work more regularly with your institution, your organization, that you focus on those folks. You definitely do not have to include every single independent contractor that has worked with you over the last 3 months, 6 months, or longer. The most important bit of information is that you figure out that number, and that's the only number you input into your workforce as well, and that number matches the folks that you email.
Okay, great. We have a request from Scott to add a 4th category of volunteer. I will say, Scott, we have done studies where we've included volunteers in the past. We have to have the same categories for everyone in the study. And so I think we've just opted not to include volunteers here. But we can definitely consider that too. Maybe it would be useful to think about if that would help people. Allison, is there, do you want to speak to that? Is there any, whether or not volunteers can be included?
Katie, I think that's a great question for us to bring back to our full team, and any questions that we aren't able to answer directly in this particular kickoff event, we're going to do a follow-up email to everyone that has registered so far. And if we're able to make any adjustments or answer any questions additionally, we can do so at that time.
Yeah, we can have a talk about it. We definitely can't change it for specific organizations, unfortunately, but we can think about whether we want to add the role generally. And then I have a question from Sierra about the question on the well-being or the perceptions page. And there is an option. She says it has a response. My life has a sense of direction and meaning, and is it supposed to be work related? It is supposed to be work related, and I do think there are instructions on that page, Sierra, to answer those questions within the context of your position and the place that you work. So I know what you're saying, that we don't necessarily aren't asking people to respond about their general mental health, but we're trying to see if the idea behind these questions is to understand if their work at your organization contributes to their sense of direction and meaning, not whether they generally have a sense of direction and meaning in life. And there are instructions to that effect on that page.
Yeah,
So
sorry,
really
I was hoping I could navigate back to it quickly, but it does specifically say at the top of that perception section that focusing on your experience working with this organization over the last 4 months, please indicate the extent to which you feel. So it does have that information on there. Thanks, Katie.
And I think if you feel, Sierra, we have a copy of the survey we can put in the follow-up email. So if you actually want to address that with your staff, if you feel like they'll be particularly interested in that sort of specification, you can definitely show them that instruction. I have a few questions about the threshold calculation for responses. So that number of people you're going to have participate in order to get a report is going to change based on how many people you have in your workforce. And what's happening is our system is calculating behind the scenes to make sure that we have enough responses for the information to be statistically significant. The minimum of 10 is really to protect anonymity, but the idea of having enough responses is just so that when you see the report that you get from your organization, we want it to be a fairly accurate representation of your workforce. So if you only have half of your workforce respond, depending on the size of your organization, it just may not be a very good or accurate representation of what's going on at your organization. So it is a different number for everyone, depending on the workforce numbers you put in. So once you go in and enter your workforce, you'll see the goals. And I will also say that we have, I think there's a kind of an online calculator that we sometimes use. And if you reach out to our support center and you share with them your workforce numbers, they can definitely work with you to give you a bit of a preview of your target numbers. But I can't really tell you everyone on this call what they'll be because they're different for each organization. So just to ask that. Are all groups asked the same questions? There are some differences between, I think, board members and staff members. I believe, Allison, you can correct me, that the board members are not asked about the perception questions because they're really focused on your work at the organization. Is that correct, Allison?
I might actually defer to Becca on this one if they are still with us in the group. I believe staff and boards see the perception questions, independent contractors and volunteers do not. And there are specific questions that are asked only of staff members, specifically the one I mentioned, if you manage other staff. So that allows us then internally to look at supervisory versus non-supervisory staff, which those of you that are following along the demographics conversations that have been happening over the last couple of years can make a big difference when you look at the diverse makeup of your organization.
Yeah,
you.
just chiming in, Allison, to say that that's totally correct. The reason why we don't show the perception questions to independent contractors is simply because that relationship might not be long enough for them to have developed those sort of perceptual attitudes. And again, the whole section is optional. So if you have a board member or staff member that's fairly new or doesn't feel like they engage enough with the organization, that section is completely optional.
I will also just jump in here, Katie, before the next question to say, we've already had some really great questions, emails, and outreach from different organizations. We're really aware that arts and culture organizations especially can have such a wide spectrum of how involved independent contractors are as maybe artists, if you're running a theater company and you have regular folks coming in and working with you, or a symphony or an orchestra. We've had some great conversations with folks. So if you do have any questions about how this would work for your organization specifically, please just send us an email and we can be in touch to talk more specifically with each of you.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to keep going back to the chat. There is a question about if compensation questions are asked in the survey, and the answer is no. This survey does not include compensation questions in its current iteration. So just to get that question answered. And then there was a question about who to follow up with. And so we'll put the information for the support center in the chat at the end of the call. Our support center is very quick, and so if you email them, what they'll do is they'll connect you to the right person right away. But we'll also be sending out a follow-up email after this webinar, and you'll have Allison and my email addresses as well. So any of us you can connect with. But I promise you, if you email the support center, they'll also connect you with Allison very quickly. They're really good at responding right away. So definitely follow up with us, Scott. Yes. And then Ruth, I think there are a couple questions about what consultants to include. I definitely would, if you have like specific people and you want to just talk to someone and think it through with someone, I definitely would recommend reaching out to support center. But I would say it's probably useful to think about. Mostly if you're participating in this study, the information should be useful to you. So definitely think about, like, who do you want to be included in that report? Anyone who is a contractor in any form at your organization is appropriate to include from our perspective, I think, if they have that contractor relationship. But I understand if you've worked with them once, maybe doesn't feel appropriate for you to reach out to them to ask them to do this. So again, I think for that one, it's kind of a judgment call for your organization, who you kind of consider a member of your workforce. And again, if you want to talk it through with somebody, feel free to contact our support center for those individual cases. Okay, let's see. And Eamon did put an article about those participation thresholds in the chat. Very helpful. That sort of explains how we calculate that. And I think that's all that I see. And we will follow up with everyone just about the volunteer question and thinking that through. Are there any other questions that anyone wants to ask about the study itself, anything that Allison shared, or kind of the how of administering the study? Okay. Great. So let's continue on. So next, we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about how to make this study a success for your organization. And so when I say success, I'm actually directly referring to that participation number, right? So we want you all to be able to have enough people participate from your workforce that you are able to access that report. That's what we're defining as success in this conversation. So we're going to talk about a couple of ways that we think are really crucial to finding that success. So first, if you want to advance our slides, Allison, we're going to start by thinking about your value proposition. So for any survey that you're sending to anyone, really, you're really asking people to give you one of their most precious resources, that you're asking them to take their time to fill out the survey. And in this case, you're also asking them to provide some pretty personal information. Part of our methodology means that they're providing it in a way that's anonymous, but it's still personal information. So we think at SMU Data Arts that the best way to convince people to give their time and to provide this information is to make sure they understand the why behind this study. And so that's why, if you've been getting our emails, this will be a familiar message to you, but we really encourage everyone to take some time right now to think through the unique value proposition for your organization. Why are you participating, and why do you want your staff to take the time to fill this out? And why will it help, everyone on your staff either do their work better or help your organization reach its goals? And so a couple things to keep in mind as you're thinking through that value proposition. You can start by thinking about what you're hoping to learn. Specifically, what do you want to find out from participating in this study? I also think it's very useful to connect this participation in this study to other things that are already happening at your organization. So a few of you mentioned your strategic plans at the top. That's a really good example. If you have existing DEIA efforts at your organization, if you have core values that you've all maybe collectively invested time in developing, that's the kind of thing where you want to make sure that is connected to this effort, so it doesn't really feel like kind of a separate thing to your staff and your board. So I really recommend kind of thinking about everything else that's happening at your organization, how this fits in, and that can be part of your why. So finally, you can think about, how are you going to utilize what you learn? Are there specific things you want to be able to do with the results? What will this kind of provide to your organization after you finish? This can help your workforce know that their time will be well spent. So for us, we're going to talk a little bit about SMU Data Arts because we use this tool. So at our own organization, we use our own workforce demographics tool to assess our staff demographics on a regular basis. And so when we talk about this with our staff, we take these things into account. We have a DEIA committee that's done work over the last couple of years focused on our hiring and retention practices. And so when the time comes to participate in our own study, we talk about that with the staff, and we explain this effort in the context of all these other things that are happening at our organization. We also think about how we will use this study at our own organization. So for example, we have all staff meetings where we review the results so that everyone can learn from the findings. We think it's important that everybody on staff kind of learn from this study and then understand the findings. We also are personally at SMU Data Arts preparing to share the results on our website because we're trying to be more transparent about our DEIA efforts. And then finally, just practically, there are grant reports we use the information for. So there's some additional uses for our resource development team. And so all of that is what we share with our workforce and our board ahead of time before we start to motivate them to participate. Kind of how can we use this information and why is it important? And so with that, I think we just wanted to hear again from all of you. So I'm going to pause the recording again. We'll resume our recording, and if you can just advance the slide, Allison. Yeah, so again, this is a really important step, and we do want to encourage you to, whether it's through a formal process or even just a conversation that Karen was describing with your staff, to take that time to develop the why. If you are someone who likes worksheets, handouts, maybe a more formal place to put this information and think through it, we do have 2 resources that we provide, and I'm going to ask Eamon to put a link to them in the chat. We have a value proposition worksheet, which is really just a version of the questions I just talked about, that where you can fill in your value proposition. It has some examples. So you can go ahead and take a look at that. And we also have this handout that I have a picture of on the screen. And so what this handout provides is it provides some basic information about the study and how it works, and also about us. And we're the people who will be stewarding the data that your workforce provides. So it just gives some background on who we are. And it has a spot in the middle where you can write in information about your value proposition. So especially if you have a larger group that you're surveying and you'd like something to just give them so they can find information and kind of understand where this is coming from and why you're doing it, and who is behind this study. This is available to you to make your own and use as you reach out to your staff. So you can go ahead and download that and use it if it seems useful to you. Great, so we're gonna continue on. And the last area of focus that we're going to think about once you've really decided and understand for your own organization what your why is communication. So your workforce, as Allison talked about, a lot of what's happening in the platform is just prompts and tasks to notify them about the survey and share that link. And I think we all know that in today's busy world, people often have to hear about something several times, maybe in several places, before they'll take an action, right? We don't always click the link, hit reply, do whatever is asked of us the first time we see an email. So our first, we're going to talk a little bit about planning for those communications and how you'll reach out to your staff. Our first suggestion is to consider choosing one point person at your organization to manage outreach. Some of you may have already done that. It might be you since you're on this call. But if you haven't, I do recommend this. It just helps ensure that everything is sent in a timely fashion, to just have one person who knows that it's their role or job to make sure all those communications go out, even if they're prompting other people to send them in some cases. Second, think specifically about how your staff communicates. So the tasks that Allison shared in the platform focus on email. We do recommend email as a baseline. That's sort of the basic way that most people probably receive information from their employers. But we know that there are also many ways that you can communicate with your workforce and share the study. So think about how your staff communicates, what channels make sense for your organization. You might look at the calendar right now and see what big meetings are coming up where you know large groups of your workforce will be gathered that you can share this in. Or maybe you have a small staff and your meetings are everyone all the time, but what's coming up where you can talk about this survey with people in person or over Zoom? Is there a messenger app or some other way that information is shared? Kind of where do people in your organization go to look for communications? And then finally, think through each audience and what specific tactics make sense. So I know at SMU Data Arts, we communicate with our board in a very specific way, and we also communicate with staff in a very specific way, and each group is a little bit different. So just make sure that you think about all those different groups as you're coming up with your communications plan. Even just spending 20 to 30 minutes right now while we have some time and distance from the study to get your lists together and think about all of this and just write it all down in a simple communications plan will definitely make this all easier once the study starts. So I highly recommend that. So I'm going to ask Allison to chime in here. Allison is our point person for our internal study of our workforce, and we did get to gold status, which we were very excited about. So we had enough responses to get our own report. So Allison, can you share a few words about what strategies you used with our staff at SMU Data Arts?
Yeah, Katie, I think you really nailed it when you talked about just understanding your own work culture and how to best communicate within that. So, for example, many offices have gone hybrid or remote recently, and I know we use a platform called Slack to do a lot of communications, info sharing. We have like a bit of a water cooler and different ways of communicating. So utilizing that for us was great. I was able to tap in a little bit to the fun-loving nature of our staff environment, as well as some of the friendly competition that we have internally in order to encourage folks to really help us get to that gold level status. So using some GIFs and some different prompts that weren't as detailed as the emails that we send out, but just really encouraging folks to engage in that way was great. The other thing I think is useful to remember is for example, your board may respond to an email from your director or executive director or the board president themselves in a way that they may not respond to the designated staff member that you have communicating this study out. So that person could reach out to those folks and ask them to send along their own personal encouragement or nudge, or provide them with the email copy and ask if they could send it directly to those folks. I think the same could be for any specific independent contractors. If you have one staff member that really works with the artists or musicians or technical contractors that move through your organization, maybe they could reach out to those folks specifically, again, with the email language that we have prepared, just so there's a bit more familiarity or a bit more context for that email. I think those would be my big suggestions. We do have about 3 email reminders that we suggest over the run of a 6 to possibly 8-week study. I think it can be easy to fall into over communicating too. So reminding to sort of space those out a little bit. So we do get enough multiple reminders, but not too much that folks might tune out as well.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Great. So before we wrap up, we again just wanted to hear from you all so that you can learn from each other, knowing your staff, any specific channels that you think you will use, or messaging if you want, if you also know your staff is very competitive and we'll all scramble to get to gold status if you mentioned that, whatever you think will work. So what channels will you use to share the study with your staff, board, and contractors? And again, feel free to use the chat. Do you have a Slack at your work? Do you use text? What specific ways do you think will work well? Microsoft Teams, yes, of course. This will be a good survey too of what different software platforms we're all using at our organizations. But yeah, great, Nancy. Yeah, whatever your platform is that folks go to check. And I know Karen already mentioned talking to her staff at a meeting. So these are all great ideas. Again, just sort of making a little plan. It doesn't need to be your most complicated communications plan, but I do think we just wanted to kind of get you thinking about how you'll handle that outreach before we get close to the study. So I will leave the chat open if anyone else wants to share any communications ideas. And then also, any final questions, feel free to put those in the chat, Ruth, via email and discuss in a meeting. Oh, that's interesting, Ruth. You're thinking about, you have a staff retreat, so you can set aside time during that time. The survey does actually work on mobile phones, so that's a great idea. You could just ask everyone to take out their phone and fill it out right there in a staff meeting or a staff retreat. I think that's a really great idea.
I think we
board
use
meeting
something
coming up, and that
Yeah.
your board gives you exactly 1 hour during your meeting and no other attention. If that's just how they work, I think that's a great suggestion for a board meeting. Just have everyone take it on their phone or their computer. Very good strategy. Great, thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Nancy. And again, any other questions or comments anyone has, feel free to share in the chat. And you can go ahead, and I think that's our last slide. So yeah, Jess, is the intention that this survey will happen yearly? Yes, so we have been on a schedule of offering this. It's kind of ended up being every other year that we've offered this open study. So I think we intend to continue to offer it. We find that some of these studies are sponsored by partners in particular geographic areas. And through working with those partners over time, I think we've found that 2 years is kind of a lapse of time to really let workforce changes that don't necessarily happen very fast. So we found that like every 2 years is sort of appropriate. So we will continue to offer these, but I'm not sure if we'll offer it more frequently, but I think every 2 years is definitely a good baseline that we will offer. And then if we feel like there's demand for more, we could always add another round. Pamela, when will the survey be made available and when will the report be available? Allison, do you want to run through the timeline for everybody before we close?
Sure. So the survey itself will launch, I believe, on April 10th. We can provide a PDF of the survey questions in our follow-up email with this, and I believe it's also already accessible on our website, so you can review those questions at any time. We will keep the survey itself live for 6 weeks with a possible 2-week extension. We'll check in with our folks and the folks that are participating to see if they think an extra 2 weeks would help that final bump in participation. And then the reports themselves will be approximately 3 weeks after the study closes.
Great, thank you. And I just put a copy, I just put the link in the chat. This is the page where you signed up to participate in the study, but it also has all this information. It has the key dates, it has the survey questions, and it has those 2 handouts that I talked about. So this is kind of a good go-to link to bookmark before the platform is open to you for any resources, or if you just want to double check those dates, that's a great place to go. And we'll send out an email again with all these resources. All right, well, we are almost to the hour, so I just want to again thank everyone for joining us today and for participating in the study. We're really excited about this. We hope that you get a lot of responses and your workforce is very engaged. I do think if you took the time to come today, that's a very good sign. So you're planning ahead. And if you have any questions at all now or later or when the study launches or at any point along the way, you can always reach out to our support center. We'll go ahead and put their contact information in the chat, and we'll also include it in the follow-up email, and they're very quick and responsive. So there we go. So yeah, feel free to get in touch if you have any other questions, and thank you again everyone for joining. We'll stay on for a couple minutes if anyone has any last questions, but if not, feel free to continue on with your afternoon, and again, thank you for joining us.
Take care.